I started to realize that there was this kind of blind spot that leftists had to the injustice of abortion. My views as a leftist continued to grow and develop, but my hatred for the practice of child killing in this country also grew.
You're tuning in to Unorthodoxing, the political talk show where uncommon politics finds common ground. Every week, you'll get news analysis from Mike Vick, an activist in the progressive pro-life movement, with 20 years of experience in politics and journalism, as well as interviews with outside the mainstream guests you won't see on the nightly news. Get ready for an unorthodox experience. Well, welcome, friends, to the first episode of Unorthodoxing. I'm your host, Mike Vick, producer of the Nuclear Option podcast and executive advisor to Pastor Chris Butler of the Center for Christianity and Public Life. I'm a member of the American Solidarity Party's national and Illinois state leadership teams and co-founder of ASP's Liberation Caucus. Every episode, I'll bring you my views on the news of the week, as well as an interview with a political activist whose views fall somewhere outside the kinds of people you'll see on most political talk shows. Now, they won't always share my views on every topic, but I'll always work to find common ground and provide you with a friendly discussion. So let's get right into the news of the week. Our first topic centers on the deeply controversial strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. In the news this week, explosive allegations that the military may have engaged in what many are calling an illegal and unconscionable action back in September. A second strike on the alleged drug boat occurred on September 2nd, which killed 2 survivors of the initial attack, a detail confirmed by the White House. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said he watched the first strike live, but did not see survivors and was not watching when Admiral Frank Bradley, who was in charge of the operation, ordered the follow-up strike. Hegseth defended Bradley's decision as the correct decision and said the U.S. supports commanders making tough calls. President Trump said he was not aware of the second strike at the time. He announced that the U.S. is going to start doing strikes on land too against alleged drug traffickers, potentially targeting Venezuela, Colombia, or any country involved in drug production, trafficking, or anything related to that into the U.S. Meanwhile, President Trump has formally pardoned former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez. This action erases a major U.S. drug trafficking conviction for Hernandez, a one-time U.S. ally. Trump told reporters on Tuesday, quote, "I feel pretty good about it," unquote, confirming the pardon. He had announced his intention to grant a full and complete pardon last week. Hernandez, who was president of Honduras from 2014 to 2022, was convicted and sentenced last year to 45 years in prison and an $8 million fine for drug trafficking offenses. The prosecutors had accused him of conspiring with drug cartels to move more than 400 tons of cocaine through Honduras and receiving millions in bribes. Hernandez has been released from prison in West Virginia, according to his attorney and the U.S. Bureau of Prisons database. His attorney thanked Trump for, quote, correcting this injustice. Trump defended the move, calling the prosecution a Biden horrible witch hunt, quote unquote, and saying that a lot of people in Honduras had asked him to pardon Hernandez. A White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, echoed this, saying he was charged because he was the president and in the opposition party to the previous administration. To be clear, no evidence of this political motivation has yet been provided, and most legal experts have said the prosecution was legitimate and based on substantial evidence. The pardon caused Trump to face a lot of criticism from both Republicans and Democrats in Congress. GOP critics like Senator Rand Paul and Representative Maria Salazar question the inconsistency of pardoning a convicted drug trafficker while simultaneously escalating efforts against drug cartels in the Caribbean, including strikes on alleged drug boats. Democratic critics argued the release went against Trump's stated aim of fighting narco trafficking. Now, it's worth noting from my own perspective that Juan Orlando Hernandez is a member of Honduras's Christian Democratic Party, so his conviction on corruption charges tarnishes that party in the country. So I find it deeply troubling both that a leader of such a party would be involved in this corruption and that Trump would pardon him, potentially merely because conservatives would like to see a quote unquote conservative politician get away with corruption. Now, from my perspective on the strikes, I am a largely pacifist person. As a Christian, I will say that the only wars that I personally know for sure meet the smell test, so to speak, would be the wars that occurred thousands of years ago as depicted in the Bible that were ordered by God himself. I think it's important for Christians who are concerned about life issues and call themselves pro-life to note that war is, of course, one of the most deadly things that happens in human civilization. Now, I would encourage folks who are concerned about this topic to head to a website called World Beyond War. They provide a lot of very comprehensive ways that we can move beyond war and the reasons why we should do that. So I would encourage you to take a look at what they have on offer. They also have a very detailed and free book that you can download both as a digital ebook or as an audiobook regarding their alternative global security system, which would move us stepwise away from the potential for armed conflict into a more peaceful posture, even as we have militaristic actors on the world stage. So I encourage folks to take a look at that website. Again, it is World Beyond War, and we will have the link in the show notes. Now, on to our second topic. The Supreme Court is likely to rule in favor of abortion opponents in a challenge to a state investigation in New Jersey. The Supreme Court held a hearing Tuesday where the justices seemed likely to rule in favor of a faith-based pregnancy center. The center is challenging a state investigation that argues it violates its First Amendment rights. The case involves First Choice Women's Resource Centers, a crisis pregnancy center that seeks to discourage abortions, and New York's Democratic Attorney General, Matthew Platkin. New Jersey's Consumer Protection Division sent a subpoena to First Choice seeking information, including details about its donors. New Jersey is one of several Democratic-leaning states probing whether these centers mislead women into thinking they offer abortions to steer them toward carrying the babies to term. The center argues that the demand for donor lists is an unconstitutional government overreach that threatens their First Amendment rights and that they should be able to challenge the subpoena in federal court. Interestingly, both the American Civil Liberties Union and the Conservative Alliance Defending Freedom support this First Amendment argument. The state argues that the information was only to be used to ask donors if they had been deceived about the center's services. They contend that free speech rights are not at risk because the group has not yet been required to turn over any information, and enforcing the subpoena requires a court order. Now, the court's majority, including Chief Justice John Roberts and even liberal Justice Elena Kagan, appeared very skeptical of New Jersey's argument. Roberts questioned if the disclosure of donor information would negatively affect future donations, and Kagan suggested an ordinary funder would not find the subpoena reassuring. The Supreme Court is expected to issue a decision on the case in the coming months. Now, for my part, as a pro-life activist, I will say, of course, that I support the Pregnancy Resource Center in this case, and indeed, pregnancy resource centers generally. I would encourage folks to visit a local pregnancy resource center and help, as well as to look into this issue yourself and look past the self-serving arguments of abortion opponents. We'll have a link below where you can find out where the nearest pregnancy resource center is to you to give them your support. Now on to our interview segment with the founder of Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, Terrisa Bukovinac. We recorded the interview earlier this week. Welcome to our interview section here. I am speaking with my friend, Terrisa Bukovinac. So I just want to give her an opportunity to introduce herself, sort of her background, what she's done in politics. So take it away, Terrisa.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I am a pro-life leftist, and I am just really thrilled that you've started this podcast, Mike. It is much needed. All of the media, it seems, is either conservative or pro-abortion. And
Mhm.
I think it's just so critical to getting our message out and to ultimately ending abortion that these media outlets exist. So I'm just really cheering for you, and I'm super honored to be your first guest. Thank you so much for reaching out. Like I mentioned, I'm a pro-life leftist. I got involved in the pro-life movement as an atheist. I am an atheist. It's been a long journey, and it's been a while actually since someone asked me to reflect on it. A lot has happened since probably the last time somebody asked me about it. But I think just being a young person in America and being a woman, I was always drawn to leftist politics. That always made more sense to me. I read A People's History of the United States. I read Noam Chomsky. I was aware of kind of this class warfare happening. My parents took me to visit people in prison and in nursing homes, and just always really instilled in me this idea of helping people in the margins. And for them, it was their religion. But for me as an adult, it has become a way of life to find ways to combat the injustices in the world. And, as a leftist woman, I found that my views aligned with most other leftist women, and I never really felt like I had a really necessary voice in any particular issue. But I always had kind of a sense that there was something off about abortion. I remember a friend early on saying to me, like, how can you care about the dolphins and not care about unborn children being killed in the womb? And I had always had kind of this sensitivity to animals and what their experience was and the oppression that they faced. But I hadn't really thought about the unborn as an oppressed group prior to that question. And I brushed it off, I think, at the time. But over time, I was exposed to images of the reality of what abortion was. And then eventually in my life, when I became an atheist and when I became an animal rights activist, I started to realize that there was this kind of blind spot that leftists had to the injustice of abortion. That seems so obvious to me when you just dig into it a little bit and look at the pictures and learn about the very eugenic and racist and Nazi roots of the abortion industry itself. So I just felt emboldened in kind of those early years of the internet to talk about these things online. And I found a group, Secular Pro-Life, and they're still doing amazing work. I'm so proud to still be part of that organization. But representation matters so much. People are not going to step out and be the first one to ever say what they're saying. It's too scary. It's psychologically very difficult hurdle to get over. And I realized that if I could be that representation for people, and because that representation existed for me and it helped draw me to secular pro-life and to realizing that I was a pro-lifer, that I could do that for other people, and particularly people on the left. I spent 14 years living in the city of San Francisco and a little bit of that time in the city of Oakland, California. And my views as a leftist continued to grow and develop, but my hatred for the practice of child killing in this country also grew. And so I founded Pro-Life San Francisco and, tried to get a group of locals together to try to address this injustice to this highly pro-abortion community in basically the most pro-abortion city in the world. And so that's how it all got started. Then the 2020 election came along. I was going around with Democrats for Life of America, bringing the banner to every state and just trying to mobilize pro-life Democrats and realizing that this is a community-based issue, is a broader political issue as well, that there is an effort to eliminate pro-life Democrats from the political sphere, as we know. And I feel like in order to end abortion, we have to fight against that with everything that we have. In an answer to that, after the election, I founded Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, also known as POW. And we made, the discovery of the Justice for the Five Babies, which are the 5 late-term aborted babies that Lauren Handy and I recovered from an all-term abortion center in Washington, D.C. And Lauren later spent a year and a half in federal prison along with Herb Garrity and others for a nonviolent protest at that same clinic 2 years before the discovery. They were eventually pardoned by President Trump. So that's kind of where we're at in what's happening in this fight. And I'm excited to talk to you soon about what we have planned next.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get to that, Teresa, I wanted to dig into some of the pieces of your background that I think will be interesting for people. You've said before, I believe, that you didn't really become pro-life until you became an atheist. First off, delve into that as much as you'd like, but also, I would love to hear a little more about what it's like to be an atheist in this pro-life sphere where most people who are coming at this are coming at it from sort of a religious perspective. At least most people that are visible, in the spaces, the activist spaces that we're in.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been obviously a huge challenge. Probably the biggest challenge of my life is existing in a world where I'm not necessarily welcomed, where my motives are always questioned and my character obviously always questioned as well, simply because I don't believe in anything supernatural. But for me, like you mentioned, I really held a pro-choice view, even though I had sensitivities about abortion. I held a pro-choice view until I lost my faith. And that's when I thought, this is the only life we get. This is all we have is our conscious experience. And if I don't have the right to take that from another conscious creature like a cow, which I believe that we all have a right to our own conscious experience, how would that not apply to the unborn? It just became so obvious to me. And also just that it wasn't something that I could just, not this or any injustice was something that I could just pray about and hope God was going to fix. It felt like the weight of the world on my shoulders in that moment. Like the only way anything is ever going to change is if people do it, and that means me. And so that's what motivated me to do this. And because of my unique point of view, my atheism and my left-leaning politics that I think are so underrepresented in the pro-life movement purposefully from both sides. But I feel called in whatever secular way possible to be here and to not be moved and to continue on in this path because others will follow. And I don't really see a way to victory for the babies unless we make it synonymous with human rights to care for them. And that means getting people on the left and getting people who do not believe in anything supernatural like me.
What are you experiencing in terms of awakening type moments? You experienced this moment for yourself as a younger person, and it set you on this path. In some ways, you and the organization that you've built has been that for other people. So knowing that no one is perfect and you're learning it as you go along, I'm curious about maybe people that you've encountered who were already in this process of awakening to being pro-life on the left, or people maybe that you've encountered who hadn't thought of it that way, but were willing to listen to you and to other people within POW because they didn't have that barrier of this person is a deeply conservative Republican. They don't share my values on any other issue. So why should I listen to them?
Yeah, we have those experiences all the time, whether it's through secular pro-life, Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, Democrats for Life. People feel like they're alone, or they just feel like they've never heard a pro-life argument before. Oh, I've never heard it like that before. It's like, yes, you have. You just heard it from someone that you automatically disagreed with. So we know that the content that we're making and the visibility that we're able to create is making a difference because it's coming from a leftist point of view. Like the Justice for the 5 Babies, for example, they couldn't put that right-wing extremists. We're very obviously leftist, and we're exposing a very obvious injustice. And I know several people who have come to work with us because they saw pictures of the 5 babies and saw our name attached to it and realized this isn't a political issue. This is the most basic human right to not be unjustly killed that we're fighting for.
Right before we get to what you're doing this week, I wanted to hear a little about your experience running for president, which is a huge thing. Not very many people do. So, what was it like running with your politics in a Democratic Party primary? Do you have any electoral aspirations in the future? So, just share about that. I think that would be great for people to hear about.
The answer is yes to everything. Running for office is going to be so important for this cause going forward, not just for me, but for everybody listening. It's just a name and filing paperwork, and all you need to do is run for office, and you can run uncensored ads on TV everywhere in America. It sounds too good to be true, but it's not. I proved it with my campaign. I ran ads on Jimmy Kimmel. I ran ads on Jimmy Fallon. I ran ads on The View, on nightly news. And I showed these pictures of the five to an audience of nearly 30 million people, and with very little funding. Like the ads themselves were between $450 and I think like $1,200. So it's totally doable. And if you are out there and you want to run for office, all I need is your name and the paperwork, and we can run an ad, and you just say at the end, I approve this message. That's it. You don't have to campaign. You don't have to raise money. You just have to be willing to be the candidate so that we can show America what abortion looks like. We are being censored out of existence. People don't even know what a dead baby looks like. They don't even know what they're supporting. And the pictures of abortion victims have been so censored in our society that we deny the reality of it and of them. And so I'm asking whoever's watching this, please consider running for office. Get in touch with me at Terrisa Lynn on Instagram. Let me know if you are interested in putting your name down for something like this, and we can make a massive difference in how people vote and the popularity of child killing in this country. And yes, I'm going to run for office. I'm going to run in 2026. I'm going to run in New Jersey for the U.S. House of Representatives so that I can run ads against AOC in New York. And then in 2028, I assume she will be running for president. I will run for president again.
That's fantastic to hear. So this is a great place to segue really into what you're doing now, this week and going forward, which of course is Rescue Resurrection. So I would love to hear you talk about a little bit about what rescue even is. And you went into that a little bit with some of the in-abortion facility rescues that you've done, but what this type of rescue is and why it's important, sort of the history of it and why it went away. And then the fact that you, among others, are helping to bring it back this week.
I'm so excited. It's been many years in the making. I believed strongly in nonviolent social revolution, especially since my work in the animal rights movement. And when I kept wondering, why don't we have a direct action movement in the anti-abortion space? But I found out later that there had been. In fact, it was the largest peaceful civil disobedience movement in the history of our country. And it was an anti-abortion effort under the name Operation Rescue. And there were rescues happening before then. There's a whole 10-year history of rescue prior to the advent of Operation Rescue. Operation Rescue, led by Randall Terry, became huge. It became a household name. They were on Oprah, 60 Minutes. It was on the nightly news. And what they did was thousands of everyday people who cared about this injustice went to abortion centers where the killing was happening, while the killing was happening. And through a nonviolent resistance action, they sat in front of abortion clinics, blocking the entrance and not allowing the clinic to operate for the day. It was extremely effective at getting visibility for the issue. And prior to the advent of Operation Rescue in 1987, abortion was not even considered as a top 10 issue. But after Operation Rescue came along, and they're getting tens of thousands of arrests for peaceful protesters, that just completely changed the situation. And by the exit polls in 1988 election, abortion was the number one issue in the election. So we know that direct action works. And since 1994, there just has been very little because of a federal law that was enacted in 94 called the FACE Act. It was intended to stop Operation Rescue, and it essentially did. People were afraid of doing serious time in federal prison, and it essentially broke the back of the movement. But because Trump has recently pardoned my friends who were imprisoned under a FACE Act violation, the DOJ has said that they aren't going to prosecute FACE, at least for 4 years. So this is really the first window since 1994 that we are given a green light for peaceful sit-ins at an abortion center. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't be prosecuted, of course, if a Democrat, a pro-abortion Democrat, decides to later. But there are other ways that we can make this less risky, at least in the beginning, because of course we want to escalate later if necessary. And so one of the ways we've decided to start is to start in a place like Memphis, Tennessee, where abortion is technically illegal, but Planned Parenthood is still operating. And they're still helping girls and minors cross state lines in order to kill their babies. They're giving them gas cards. They're helping them make arrangements. And there are no state level FACE laws here in Tennessee. So we've decided, Anti-Abortion Uprising, Terrisa, some other activists, as well as Randall Terry, are partnering together to actually do a major relaunch of nonviolent civil disobedience on behalf of the babies in 30 years. This is going to be a huge rescue reunion. A lot of these people who were arrested back in the day, went to jail together, haven't seen each other since then. And so much has changed, and there's still a need for this type of work. And there's a need to introduce it and pass the torch to the next generation. So we're expecting hundreds of people of all ages and backgrounds. I think the fact that Randall and I are kind of organizing this together says a lot about the fact that we're willing to work with literally anybody. It doesn't matter your politics. It doesn't matter your religion. Randall says, come save a baby for the reason of your choosing. Like, we don't care what's motivating you. Just come save a baby with us and help us change the world. So I really want to invite everyone to this event. There's going to be a variety of levels of risk. Not everyone will block. And if you are interested in just coming to observe, we would love that. We're expecting a lot of press. We're expecting pro-abortion protesters. We're expecting a moment in history to say, hey, we are not going to let this go. We are going to take this all the way, and we are not going to become like these European countries that just accept child killing as a way of life. We are going to stop it, and we are going to set an example for the world and how we treat each other, and hopefully build a better world in the process.
Where can people go to find out more about this and to RSVP to come?
Go to rescueresurrection.com. You can check out POW's social media. It's at PAAUNOW. And my personal social media is at Terrisa Lynn. That's TERRISALIN. Send me a message. I'd love to connect with anybody who wants to talk rescue, justice for the 5, running for office, being a pro-life Democrat. You are welcomed.
Awesome. Well, Terrisa, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. As I told you privately, you were my dream first interview. So I'm so excited that you enthusiastically and immediately said yes to that. And, hopefully this can get out far and wide to folks. You can expect more interviews like this with more people like Terrisa and other political oddballs of all different stripes. And maybe along the way, we'll discover that we're all sort of oddballs and stop expecting our politics to just be what it is, what we've allowed it to become with the major parties, and have a little more diversity of thought in all spheres. Again,
Absolutely.
Terrisa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great to see you. Great to chat. Thanks for giving pro-life leftists a voice, and keep up the great work.
Thanks again to Terrisa for being our first guest. You can find Unorthodoxing on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Substack. Follow me by heading to my website, votevickusa.com. That's votevic, V as in Victor, ICK, USA.com, or my Linktree at linktree.com/votevicUSA. To support the show and get exclusive members-only content, check us out on Patreon at patreon.com patreon.com/VoteVicUSA, or head to Substack at VoteVicUSA.substack.com. This week, we'll have an extended and deeply heartbreaking portion of my interview with Terrisa, during which she and I discussed the Justice for the Five issue in much greater detail, and Terrisa makes the case for why pro-life activists shouldn't shy away from the controversial practice depicting victims of abortion in full and graphic detail through images and videos. You'll also get a bonus news topic where I discuss President Trump's heartless crackdown on the Somali immigrant community, the dehumanizing rhetoric he uses against immigrants, and what the truly Christian response should be regarding immigration. Thanks for tuning in, Unorthodoxers. Until next time, you stay faithful.